Good morning, day 2 of my Mount Howitt loop. So I came up Helicopter Spur yesterday. I'm going over Howitt this morning and try and find some water at the spring up there, hopefully. If I find water, I'll probably go around to Stanley Name Spur, cross the crosscut saw and down Stanley Name Spur this afternoon. If I don't get water up on Howitt, I'll probably just drop down the Howqua Feeder Track down to the river. Because I can't really be bothered dropping over to McAllister Springs. So we'll see how it all goes. It's another beautiful morning. It's not particularly cold. It's actually the 15th of April today. So we're about half a month away from winter. So this is a little bit drier and warmer than I'd normally anticipate. All right, I'll spin the camera around. So I'm following the Australian Alps walking track over to, well, at least to Mount Howitt. May go a bit across the crosscut sort of Stanley Name. We'll see how it all pans out as the day goes on. There's a few deer banging around last night up here. Well, I think that deer, I didn't get out of the tent to have a look, but I'd say so. All right, I'm going to sidle around Big Hill first up this morning, and then I'll be climbing up to Howitt. There's a couple of little saddles. So, haven't seen any walkers. I saw some school kids down at when I left the car at Upper Howqua, but no one on the track yet. Yeah, so I'm sidling around Big Hill at the moment. I think I might have to get rid of the thermal soon, because I'm starting to warm up. So there's a light frost. So it must have been a bit colder than I thought last night. At some stage anyway. Oh, that's where I'm heading, up to that bare ground. I've just got one more kind of saddle to go through. Okay, time for a break. Incidentally, this is the last good camping before you break out above the tree line. Climb Mount Howitt, I think. This is where I camp. Last year on the Buller Huts Trail. Alright, let's pull up a rock and have a rest for a minute. It's a bit like Hellfire Saddle, this one. The snow gums in this little flat spot are very gnarly and beautiful. So I've just climbed up from the left there. This is the Howqua Feeder Track. It's west peak of Mount Howitt there. That's the quickest way off the mountain. Well, unless you parked over on the Mount Howitt Road. There's Mount Buller in the background. So my plan is to go over the top, or go up to the top and then go down, drop down to the spring on Mount Howitt. If there's no water at the spring, then I'll probably retrace my way back down here and go down the feeder track. If there is water, I'll have a good drink and head over to Stanley Name and drop down that way, I reckon. Well, I'm up on Mount Howitt. How beautiful is that? It's a Viking, that shark tooth one. And that's a crosscut saw in the middle distance. So I've made it to the spring around on Mount Howitt, or below Mount Howitt. It's taken about, at the moment, 5 minutes to do a litre. So it's pretty good. Still flowing reasonably well. Alright, that means I'm probably going to duck around Stanley Name Spur now, I reckon. I've got some water. I've just had some brekkie. It's a sensational day, that's for sure. Might as well make the most of it. So, I've had a change of plans. I've just been reading, I've got some internet up here, just been reading that Stanley Name's full of blackberries again. And I haven't got my gaiters, my canvas gaiters on this one. So I'm going back to the Howqua Feeder Track and dropping down there. I can't be bothered pushing through blackberries with bare shins today. So that means I'm climbing back over Mount Howitt and then over to West Peak. Anyway, it's not a super hard climb. It'll also mean I get out of the hills before the deer start wandering around. Because they're a bit of a menace on the road at the moment up here. Okay, it's a couple of hours later and I'm back at the same spot. So I came up from there this morning from Hellfire on the Alps track. This is where I leave the Alps track and I'm on the Howqua Feeder Track now. So that's West Peak over there. And just like that, I'm on West Peak. That's Howard over there. I'm at the drop off the edge of this after a short break. Next time I come through up here, there's a fairly good chance I'll be covered in snow. Okay, time to leave the high country, start dropping down. So this Howqua Feeder track is a fairly relentlessly steep and downhill run, so I've lengthened my trekking poles a little bit because there's not a lot of up. But having said that, it's probably the easiest way up and down from the Howqua Riverside. It's easier than Stanley Name and Helicopter Spur, that's for sure. Gee, that wind is chilly. It looks warm, but when you're out of the sun, it cools down pretty quick. Gee, the walking up here is beautiful sometimes. I mean, if it's pouring with rain, not so much, but on days like this, it's definitely up there, that's for sure. So I'm still dropping down the Howqua Feeder Track, obviously. So I've dropped a fair bit of height. The track, the gradient of the track has eased off a bit now. That's Mount Magdala up there, towering above. That little notch is Hell's Window, I think. So that's where I was yesterday, up the top there. I think that in the middle there is Helicopter Spur. The sun's not doing me any favours this morning. Okay, I'm almost down to Howqua now. Trees are getting a lot bigger. I'm down. This isn't a Howqua, this is a tributary. But Howqua's just 100 metres away. It's nice to hear some trickling water. So just come down there, that's the track that I would have come in from Stanley Name Spur. That's the Howqua and the blackberries down there. I don't know what I got now, probably 6 k's I guess. I'll no doubt have a few blackberries to negotiate. It's almost like Parks Vic have just handed over all the track clearing to the volunteers. The volunteers do an unbelievable job, but that shouldn't mean that the government doesn't fund Parks Victoria, and Parks Victoria does some of the heavy lifting too. Maybe it's just my imagination, but it looks a bit that way to me nowadays. So no problem crossing the Howqua with dry feet today. It's not always the case on the Howqua River. So the Howqua is definitely very low. This is mid-May, we're 2 weeks from winter. So there's definitely a lot of blackberries down this Howqua River section, which is why I didn't come down. Well, one of the reasons I didn't come down Stanley Name, because once you hit I think it's the Queen Spur track, it's like this. Well, it's worse than this. You kind of can't avoid them. But apart from the blackberries, the walking's actually pretty cruisy now. I'm just kind of, this is an old, I don't know, logging road or something from back in the day. So back in the day, this track never used to crisscross the river quite as much, but there's a couple of spots where it's been washed away. Doesn't really matter today, I'm not getting wet feet, but if the river's high, you're going to get wet feet down there, that's for sure. Okay, just arriving back at the Upper Howqua picnic area. This is the last crossing. So between here and where I drop down the feeder track from the top, I guess you cross the river 8 times. And like I said, the water's extremely low at the moment, but you'll normally expect wet feet on those 8 crossings, or at least some of them anyway. Alright, I'm going to spin the camera around and sign off, I guess. Get out of these mountains before the deer come out to play tonight. There's the ute. Time to turn the camera around. Okay, that's me back at the ute. Today came to about 13.8 k's and about 400 metres climbing. Look, it's not a particularly hard day, although the track is rough in spots. The length along the Howqua, obviously, I've alluded to already, and there's a few blackberries. The top of the feeder track off at West Peak is steep and loose, so just be, I mean, you're not going to fall off the edge, but you might slip over on the kind of loose gravel. All right, and I did get water, as you saw, out at the spring on the side of Howitt today, but there's not much water anywhere else up here at the moment. There's a bit of water over at McAllister Springs, I think, and I believe this spring on Stanley Name Spur, or the creek, down the kind of heading down Stanley Name, has got a little bit of a flow. Camp Creek's getting very dry though, from what I'm hearing. All right, take it easy. I'll catch you on the next one.